So good afternoon, everybody, and happy AAPI Heritage Month. My name is Victoria Yu. I work in the International Trade Administration doing climate trade policy, and really happy to be here today. Very excited and honored to have DANA TAI SOON BURGESS with us for a really interesting discussion and program. So to kick things off, I'd like to turn it over first to Emily Kessel, who is the president of the AAPI Employee Resource Group within Commerce, to provide some brief opening remarks.
Thank you so much, Victoria. As she shared, I'm Emily Kessel, and I'm with the Minority Business Development Agency and also currently serving as the president for our DOC Asian American Pacific Islander Employee Resource Group. First of all, thank you, Dana, for joining us today, and really looking forward to the program that has been planned out for this event. And second, just wanted to thank our board member, Victoria, who is also our moderator once again, for your leadership with planning this event, along with some others in the ERG, giving Michael and Delpha a shout out for really just pulling this together. And I've wanted to share about our ERG. Just really great to have so many people here for this Heritage Month celebration for our special emphasis event. And we hope to have you for more of our upcoming DOC AAPI ERG events and meetings. Our ERG, we are very happy to say, is growing in membership with both members and allies representing almost all of the commerce bureaus. And hopefully we'll continue to see more active activity coming from members, and please feel free to reach out anytime to join and to be part of programs like this today. I did want to make, before turning it back over to Victoria, I did want to acknowledge, coming from other members as well, to just provide a brief honorable acknowledgement of the passing of our former Commerce Secretary, Norm Mineta, and just to all the contributions that our former secretary has made to the U.S. As U.S. Secretary of Commerce, as well as his many throughout his political career and inspirational life journey. It really does lead by example for this generation and the next, and it's very exciting now to be able to hear from Dana and others about another leadership path where we are having Asian American representation. I'm very excited to kind of see this growing in this space. So I just wanted to say that, and thank you again, Dana, and turning it back over to Victoria.
Thank you, Emily. Just a couple quick housekeeping items before we jump into it. Please do keep yourself muted. If you're not talking, we will have an opportunity for discussion and questions towards the end of the program, so please feel free to put them in the chat box or raise your hand and we'll get to them at the end. Also noting that this is being recorded, so we will be sharing this recording later. And then the last thing to note is for those of you who are joining via audio line only, there are a number of videos that we will be watching. If you're joining by audio, you will only be able to hear the audio of those videos and you'll not be able to see the videos. So just noting that, I will indicate when we are moving to videos. So just very, very briefly wanted to share that I grew up dancing and have always been a supporter of the arts, and thought it'd be really interesting to bring Dana in and talk more about his work as a choreographer, particularly the work that he's done on AAPI issues and contributions, AAPI contributions to the U.S. economy, really looking at that lens through art. So before I introduce Dana, I just wanted to share a quick video so that folks are a little more familiar with the work of a choreographer, and to kind of frame the conversation for today. So I'm going to go ahead and share a video, and for those who are only joining via audio, you will not be able to see this video, unfortunately.
That utilizes movement of the human body and steps in order to tell a story. And often that story is created with music, with a theme, with costumes. I'm able to use all of those things, create a movement language, and then make a unique dance that I hope people will respond to. My goal as a choreographer is to illuminate the different emotional journeys that we all go on. Movement itself is this fundamental universal language because we all understand when someone's depressed, or we understand when someone is elated, and we all tell stories of love and of death and of happiness. There's something about the human condition itself all across the globe that understands those stories when told through dance. This work is based on an exhibition, The Face of Battle, America at War, 9/11 to Now. And it really focuses on the American experience for veterans. So I was especially moved by the portraits by Louis Palu, whose images of soldiers in Iraq and Afghanistan very much showed what a toll that experience takes on an individual. One of the things that became so apparent was just how young these individuals were, and yet how hardened and almost emotionally aged that they looked also. When I looked at the images, spoke to some of the artists, and also took the time to speak to veterans who had returned and live here in Washington, D.C., I realized that a major issue is post-traumatic stress disorder, and how to portray that through movement really became the challenge of the dance itself. The choreography is developed so that it is from the perspective of a veteran who has returned, and he keeps looking backwards into the memory of what occurred while he was abroad. And so it's constantly about this issue of how does trauma attach to an individual and what triggers an individual's emotional reactions to different situations. For the audience, I hope that they ruminate on what they've seen and that they think about their own life cycle, about their own life experiences, and have a sense of empathy to others, and also have an experience which is sublime.
So with that, I'd now like to introduce DANA TAI SOON BURGESS. DANA TAI SOON BURGESS is a leading American choreographer and cultural figure. The Washington Post Pulitzer Prize winning dance critic Sarah Kaufman writes of Burgess not only a Washington Prize, but a national dance treasure. The Smithsonian named Burgess its first ever choreographer in residence in 2016. He is based at the National Portrait Gallery, where he explores the confluence of dance and portraiture. Burgess has performed, taught, and choreographed around the world. He founded the DANA TAI SOON BURGESS Dance Company in 1992. It is the preeminent modern dance company in the Washington, D.C. region. He is also the host of slantpodcast.com, which explores the lives and creative processes of prominent Asian American artists. Lastly, 3 portraits of Burgess reside in the permanent collection of the Smithsonian, as well as his family archive. So I'm very excited and honored to introduce DANA and have him be with us today. DANA, it'd be great to hear more about your background, particularly, how you grew up and your path to becoming a choreographer.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me here today. It's really a pleasure to know that so many people are interested in not just dance, but also this journey of all of us understanding and embracing diversity, equity, inclusion. So thank you. My mother's family, I'm Korean American, is part of the first wave of Koreans to settle in America. So they came to the island of Oahu in 1903 on the very first ship called steamship that brought Korean Americans in a group to Hawaii, which was named the Gaelic. And they essentially came on plantation worker contracts. And they lived on the plantation, and they were brought over to work on sugarcane and pineapple plantations. So, and the reason that they came was that they were escaping the incursion of the Japanese closing down the Empire of Korea during that time period. So they were political refugees in many ways. So my family worked for 3 generations on the plantation, and the plantation had a system which was very difficult to get out of. And even my mother, who's 91 now, she picked pineapples as well all the way through high school. I grew up in Santa Fe, New Mexico, actually, because my parents were both visual artists, and my mom still makes art every single day, which is very, very inspiring. And I grew up in a neighborhood called Casa Solana, which still exists in Santa Fe today. And I went to bilingual schools. And although Casa Solana means the house where the sun shines, essentially, it had a great shadow that was cast over it in many ways. Because when I was a child of 8 years old, I found out that what was underneath the neighborhood that had been built over it just 30 years after what was there was a Japanese internment camp. And so when I was a child and I found this out, I remember coming home from a friend's house and hearing about this. And I said to my parents, like, what, like, can you be imprisoned for being Asian American? And they were trying to explain this mistake of Executive Order 9066, which interned and incarcerated, imprisoned over 100,000 Japanese Americans during World War II to me. And I was really inconsolable. Like, I could not understand it. And of course, it's something that we can't even understand to this day, except that it is based in xenophobia and exclusion, right? So I grew up in this neighborhood, and it was predominantly a Latinx neighborhood, went to bilingual schools in Spanish and English, and we had a fairly small but active Asian American community there. And so I was part of the martial arts dojo, which was run by a man named Makio Nishida. And he was sort of a Mr. Miyagi from The Karate Kid before The Karate Kid even existed as a film. And he became a really wonderful movement mentor. And as I grew up as a teenager, I was looking for this confluence of art and movement. And when I took a dance class for the first time, I just knew that's what it was. It was my calling, because I could have the same physical discipline as martial arts, but I could have this artistic outlet that was so very much present in my family situation. So I ended up becoming a dancer. I went to University of New Mexico for dance, and then I moved to the East Coast to dance for different companies, got a master's of fine arts in dance, and really decided that the roles that I was being cast in just didn't feel authentic to the way that I grew up or the way that I was perceiving the world. So I decided to start a dance company, and that was 30 years ago. And at the time, it was predominantly Asian and Asian American dancers. And we really came together in 1992 as a way to have a modern dance discussion around what our identities were and to share our stories through dance. And from that, the company grew, it expanded, it became more diverse, as did the stories and the kinds of work that I do. And so that's really how I became a choreographer.
Thanks, Dana. That's really fascinating. And I can say, too, growing up in the Los Angeles area and trying to become a professional dancer when I was a teenager, you definitely go to auditions where they're looking for a certain look, and maybe they're not looking for Asian Americans that day, or there's very much like a cookie cutter mold that you often had to fit into in order to be selected for production, or even Rent, my favorite musical. There's always been one Asian American role in the ensemble, and it's the same role. And so if there are multiple Asian American artists and dancers that would be good for that role, unfortunately, there's only one role that can be cast. So I think definitely it's so wonderful that you've been able to create a community that really embraces AAPI artists and AAPI stories.
Mhm.
And so speaking of stories, wanted to ask you another question that I think will lead into a discussion of two works in particular that we'll view today. So where do you draw inspiration from, particularly when you're trying to capture or portray the AAPI experience? Obviously, there's a lot in your background and the way that you were brought up, but are there other places that you draw inspiration?
Sure. There's something I believe in the way that I grew up, because Santa Fe in the early 70s, mid 70s was not the Santa Fe of today, which is post what I call Ralph Lauren, this whole sort of like fashionista perspective of Santa Fe. It really was a small artist community, and it was a Latinx community, an indigenous community, and an other community, right? It was sort of this triad. And within that, there were lots of different voices, lots of different languages, perspectives, concepts about relationship to the land. And so from that, I realized that this universal language that I talk about would be dance for me, because it was something that everybody understood, regardless of what language you spoke or read, or what your background or history was. So I started at a very young age, I think, being a little voyeuristic. I loved hearing individual stories about family experiences, about journey, about overcoming hardship, about resilience especially. And that's something that I continue to this day. So I'm always researching not just personal story, but historic stories, different periods in history, and what those socio-political factors meant to individual experiences. One of the main goals that I have at the Smithsonian is to mine the collection, so to speak, for stories of diversity that haven't been heard or told before, that need to come to the forefront so that we can reconsider the canon of American history in general. But one of the ways that I started, again, was to kind of look at personal story. So my family history of being on the plantations, I created a piece called Tracings in 2003, which ended up being the centerpiece for the Korean American Centennial celebration. And we have a little segment of that maybe we could show.
Absolutely, I will show that now. And again, just for our friends and colleagues joining via audio, you will not be able to see this video, unfortunately.
So I should explain a little bit about the dance. You know, in Korean tradition, the color white is actually the color of mourning, of sadness and grief after someone has passed. And the dancer who is the main dancer is wearing a traditional hanbok, or a traditional Korean dress in the dance. And she has this white piece of cloth, and Korea traditionally has a long history of shamanism. And so the Korean shaman has a ritual that they take a white piece of cloth and they tear it in two. And that is to represent the veil between the physical and the psychic realm. And so this little part of the dance is kind of the introduction of what the dancer pulls out of her suitcase, so to speak, the thing that she carries with her in terms of history. And these different dancers come to life kind of like ghosts. Yeah. And this last year, because of the pandemic, we sort of like switched gears for a while before we could get back to live performance, and created a series of social justice videos that were based on an exhibition called The Struggle for Justice, which is at the National Portrait Gallery. And it's an exhibition which is part of their permanent collection of individuals who are social justice icons, so to speak. And so I was at the museum speaking with George Takei, who is the actor who played Sulu in the original Star Trek. And we had this conversation about his photo, and he started telling me about how when he was a child, he was incarcerated in an internment camp. And we just had this long discussion about his life's journey. And I decided that one of our social justice videos, like I'd like to make one that's a tribute to him. So this next video that we'll see is a tribute to George Takei. And it starts out with the image which is in the exhibition with a little explanation about his life, which is quite fascinating. So even though it looks like maybe the video is not running, it's actually running, because it's just giving you time to read the information. So thanks.
Great, thanks, Dana. And I will go ahead and show that now. Again, for our friends joining just via audio, unfortunately, you'll not be able to see this video. This video is about 5 to 6 minutes long, so we'll see you on the other side. Dana, you're on mute.
Oh, thanks. So I should explain for this video that the portrait of George Takei was taken at one of the camps with other survivors who had returned, and he's releasing butterflies. And so we decided that the theme should be the release of these butterflies to show resiliency.
Well, thanks for sharing that piece and that explanation. Very beautiful piece. I loved the butterflies. I loved the black and white, everything turning to color. And I also really loved the lighting and the shadows. I think it added a ton of extra dimension. And I mean, I could go on and on. I also like how intentional you can be when you do something that's created for film, and really decide what you want the audience to focus on, and how you want them to interpret movement. So
yeah, it's such a different medium for sure. It's fascinating. Yeah. And what we're working on currently, like in rehearsal right now, is that next week we have a premiere of a piece entitled El Muro, the Wall, which El Muro means the wall in Spanish. And it's about the southern US border and really the search for individuals, an individual's search for finding a place of safety to call home in the United States. And it's also based on a new exhibition, which is at the National Portrait Gallery, and a painting by Rigoberto Gonzalez, which is just it's a beautiful painting of asylum seekers. So if anyone's interested in coming at 6 p.m. on the 17, 18, and 19 at National Portrait Gallery in the Kogad Courtyard, and it's actually a live performance, which we're super excited to be back to live again.
it's very exciting. Do you have a link that we can share with the group?
Yes, if they go to dtsbdc.org, it's they can see our upcoming events. So it's my initials, dtsbdc.org.
And I'll put a link to your company's website here in the chat. I think we also wanted to open it up to discussion and questions from the audience. So please feel free to raise your hand or type any questions into the chat.
Oh, great.
I do see lots of really great comments.
Nice.
Thank you. Lots of supporters of your work, Dana.
Oh, that's sweet. Thank you.
So maybe as folks are thinking of questions, I'll start with one. So Dana, I understand that you sit on the advisory council board of the President Wilson House with other historians, preservationists, and educators.
Mm-hmm.
And the President Wilson House seeks to share President Wilson's legacy, including World War I, the League of Nations, and his vision for world peace. But also it's an effort to try to learn from regressive policies that institutionalized racism, segregation, and the loss and obstruction of civil liberties. So how has your experience with the President Wilson House shape your perspectives on how AAPI contributions are portrayed in history? And how has that shaped your work on AAPI topics?
You know, I was asked to serve on that advisory council in order to bring a contemporary perspective to the legacy of Woodrow Wilson. And when I was first asked, I thought, oh my goodness, like there were so many really bad policies, horrific statements that President Wilson made. And yet then I thought, well, if there's something that's going to reveal that and make a difference, so we better understand his presidency three-dimensionally and we can bring perspectives of diversity to the forefront, then I accept. And so I've been helping to program and really illuminate the conversations that have impacted Asian Americans and other communities, of course, African American communities under his presidency, and just rethink what are the exclusionary actions that have occurred during history and how can we right them. You know, in President Woodrow Wilson was in 1912 really and 1913 supported the exclusion of Asian Americans from owning land, from being part of the American tapestry in general. And so it's like, how do we note that there's some really interesting facts? For example, if we go back to 1890, for example, Chinese immigrants made up 75% of California's agricultural workers, right? But we go fast forward to 2017 and 0.7% of agriculturalists are Asian American in America today, right? So, we start to look at this history of exclusion that starts with Chinese Exclusionary Act in 1882, and then continues with under Woodrow Wilson. And then, of course, we have Executive Order 9066, which happens in 1942, and completely changes the terrain of that whole industry, which is fascinating. And it changes the terrain of how America is viewing allowing Asian Americans to be part of a larger American dialogue. So for me, being part of that council, again, allows me entree to really seeing American stories, hearing about them, and researching them more. And one thing that I very much like also about being at the Smithsonian is I have so many conversations with historians and curators, which is really great as well.
Great, and thank you for that, Dana. We do have some comments and questions in the chat. Just a comment from Sharon. Fantastic. I'm a dancer / scientist from New Mexico too.
Oh, great. Welcome.
And a question from Julie. I'm the mom of a 15-year-old dancer of Japanese / Caucasian ancestry. She's doing ballet and contemporary. What advice do you have for young Asian dancers on what to expect from the industry?
The industry is challenging, it's competitive, but also I always tell young people that if this is your passion, you will be successful in it. And so I think it's incredibly important to allow her to find out as much about the industry as possible, to see as many professional dance performances as possible, to understand where she is sort of like placed in the field, and also to get a broad education, because the best dancers, the dancers that are sought out by choreographers, have an incredible depth and breadth of life experiences and also are highly educated. And so they have bachelor's degrees, they often have master's degrees. And because the broader your life experience, the more that you can bring to stage. And those are the performers that I think all of us really love watching. So I would say allow her to follow her goal and do her research, and know that if this is her passion, she will be successful in it, and it'll be very rewarding.
Thanks, Dana. Another question from Robert about the George Takei piece, A Portrait of George Takei. What was the significance of the dancers in black in the beautiful and moving butterfly piece you just showed?
Oh, thanks. I was thinking of the color black as this overarching shadow that is surrounding these individuals, because what happened with the Executive Order 9066 is that when the National Guard came to your door, essentially you were only allowed to take a suitcase with you. And so the three sort of lead dancers have this individual suitcase, and they are going on this journey of completely not understanding what's happening to them, of being incarcerated, of trying to find solace within their community and with each other in the midst of a horrific situation. And so everybody kind of is that dark political force that moved them into this place. And the butterflies are ultimately what they carry with them, which is hope.
Beautiful. A question from Francine. You mentioned several times how dance conveys stories. I often find it beautiful but abstract. My daughter, who's a dancer and choreographer, says you have to study it to recognize references and vocabulary, and then it makes more sense. Do you have any suggestions for the non-dance literate folks to keep in mind so that they get more out of the story than just beauty?
Yes. You know, I always tell audience members to just allow yourself to be open to whatever you're seeing, and whatever comes up subconsciously and then consciously is the correct reaction. Everybody's life experience, I think, is reflected within a dance. It's like it will trigger something within you, a memory, a hope, a dream, you know, a personal story. So dance is sort of a mirror unto the self. I don't think that there's a right or wrong answer of ever saying like, oh, is this dance about that or is it about this? Because it really comes down to whether it moved you emotionally or it drove you to a new place of empathy for a community you never thought of. And I do think that sometimes modern dance can suffer from being too abstract in a sense, right? And sort of drive people away. But I think that the more that we embrace our audiences, the more that audiences just remain open to what they're seeing, the easier it gets and the more enjoyable it becomes.
Another question from Rakaya. Any specific exhibits at the Smithsonian that you recommend we check out?
I would definitely recommend the Outwind 2022 American Portraiture exhibit, which just opened at the National Portrait Gallery. So what's really exciting about this exhibit, I believe, is that it represents so many diverse perspectives from America and its territories today. These are all contemporary artists, and they are all delving into many current issues, but through portraiture, which are affecting all of us. And I think that you'll really enjoy it. And for my new work, El Muro de Wall, the painting by Gilberto Gonzalez is actually in that exhibit. And so I was very moved by it. But I love the stories and just the diversity that you see in there, because you know, Kim Sayet, the director of the National Portrait Gallery, you know, we often talk, and you know, things are different now. She's really changing the terrain of museums, in that it used to be a museum was a place where you would just go and you don't touch and you just, like, you know, look at something and walk on, and it's, you know, predominantly to be quite honest, like in portraiture, it's sort of like dead Caucasian men, right? But now there's a whole shift happening, right? That you don't have to be dead to be in the portrait gallery any longer, which is a huge shift. And you know, can represent all these different diverse perspectives. So I think when you go to the National Portrait Gallery, you'll be quite amazed. And it's actually one of the most visited museums of the Smithsonian these days.
Fascinating. So great to hear that it's more inclusive than it has been in the past.
Absolutely, yeah.
A question from Sarah. What were your choreographer inspirations in developing your own style?
I actually think, interestingly enough, martial arts had a lot to do with my own style, because it was sort of my initial movement training. And then I took a lot of different culturally specific dance forms, and that made me reconsider movement and gesture specifically. in dance. And I was always interested in moving a certain way. You know, we're all built differently, so our bodies want to move a certain way. Some people like to move slowly, some people like to move fast. You know, it's like that's just how we're built muscle wise. And so I just went with that too. But I think that what I always tell young choreographers is to never try and copy choreography, but instead figure out what it is about you that's unique. And if you can figure out what that uniqueness is, then go with it, because there's no choreographer who's well known who isn't known for their unique style, right? It's like nobody knows a choreographer because they copy other choreography. They know a choreographer because they're completely unique.
Absolutely. A comment from Shauna. I wonder if the racial diversity was intentional in the dance. And I think this is referencing the George Takei piece. My grandmother is from the Philippines and my grandfather was a Black man serving in World War II. There were a lot of cultures joining in during war times.
Mm-hmm. Actually, that's my dance company, and everyone's very diverse, comes from many different backgrounds, and the casting of the three leads was intentional in that the three women that you saw are all Asian American, and I thought it was important to have them front and center in this piece. And for me as a choreographer, because I am so interested in equity and interested in personal story and histories, it's so important for the dancers to reflect that diversity of America. And I think that it really deepens the work and makes me grow when I hear and understand different stories too in America, in our landscape. So I've always had diversity in the company, and I think especially I look for dancers who are cross-trained. And what I mean by that is that all of the dancers in the company not only have training in ballet and modern dance, but a lot of them have training in some other dance form, whether it's traditional Filipino dance or whether it's traditional Korean dance or let's see, tap or jazz. There's there's always something else, and I'm always looking for that expansion of movement vocabulary in the room.
Great. And another question from Rachel. I have young children, age 3, 7, and 10, and they're inspired in different ways through dance, music, and set designs. Are there performances you would recommend beyond things like the Nutcracker and Cats that can serve as a gateway to kids for infusing diversity and the love of dance into their lives?
Let's see. There are. Where does she live, by the way? Does she say?
DC.
DC. So there are several different theater companies whose productions often have movement in them, which are designed for young audiences. And so those would be like Imagination Stage has some adventure theater at Glen Echo. Even the Kennedy Center has some young audiences specific performances as well. So she might check into those. And then of course, classes themselves, right? Like creative movement classes, modern dance classes, ballet classes, tap classes, Irish step classes, you name it, like it's out there for young people. Yeah.
And to add on to that, Kenya in the chat also noted that there are a lot of things around the holidays, things like Hot Chocolate Nutcracker, as well as Shen Yen. Having studied with Debbie Allen, I will note that Hot Chocolate Nutcracker is a great production, and they often do. It doesn't necessarily tour, but I think they do like on TV, or there's some type of recorded performance that is accessible to folks around the country.
Absolutely, yeah.
Folks also recommended Cinetic Theater, and Rachel has noted that they have season tickets to Imagination Stage, and they love it.
Oh, great. Nice.
And those are all the questions in the chat so far. I know we're nearing towards the end of our time, so would welcome any final questions for Dana, questions or comments. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and wrap up.
Yeah.
So, not seeing anything else in the chat. Thank you so much, Dana, for sharing your work, for sharing your background, your inspiration. Just super insightful, very interesting, and really beautiful movement, beautiful work. So really appreciate you coming today and sharing all of this with us. It was a really great discussion. And we will certainly send this out to folks. Also wanted to flag that we are partnering with the Office of Civil Rights on this program. So very happy to have their support as well. And I do see a hand up from a phone number. So maybe if you want to go ahead and unmute yourselves.
Oh, one other thing I wanted to mention too is that my new memoir by University of New Mexico Press is in pre-sale now, so you can get it from Barnes & Noble or Amazon or University of New Mexico Press, and it's called Chino and the Dance of the Butterfly, and they can just search my name and it'll come up. But it's a memoir literally about growing up in Santa Fe as an Asian American and this whole journey of becoming a choreographer. So it's actually, I think people will find it interesting if they like dance or they just like a story about coming of age.
Great, thanks so much for flagging that. And Dana, after we end, I'll leave the event up for a little bit. There are a lot of really wonderful comments, and I want to make sure that you see those.
Oh, thank you so much. And then there's a hand raised. Is that right? Here.
Yes. Go ahead and unmute yourself. We have a hand raised from a 801 number. You should be able to speak. Go ahead. All right, I'm not hearing any audio, so if you do have a question, feel free to reach out to me afterwards. Happy to connect you to Dana. I can put my email address in the chat.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. It was just really wonderful to have this opportunity to speak with everyone and to share. So thank you.
Thank you, and I hope everyone enjoys the rest of May Heritage Month. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.